meeting is being recorded.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for coming to this TA call. I'd like to introduce Jay Culkin. Jay is a professionally credentialed youth peer advocate who has been working in human services since 2015. Jay is also a New York certified peer specialist. Jay received a BA in sociology in 2018 from Stony Brook University and received a master's degree in social and public policy with an advanced certificate in child and family advocacy in 2023 from Empire State University. He has the he was the first of a pilot project at SCO, Family of Services, as well known child and family service nonprofit from the New York City metropolitan area to have seasoned YPAs mentoring and new YPAs. The purpose of mentoring was to help newer YPAs practice boundaries, communication, and assertiveness, and other useful skills as lived experience professionals. Jay has spent most of his time as a YPA advocating for transgendered youth and providing information to staff about quality LGBTQ plus care and mental health settings using examples from his own experience. He has been working to raising awareness of neurodivergency and the specific needs of neurodivergent individuals in school settings and the workplace environment. Jay has a passion of literacy, poetry, and English language arts. As part of his passion, Jay has previously volunteered as a tutor for Literacy Suffolk Inc., is currently volunteering as a docent for the Walt Whitman Birthplace Association, and has been assisting with running a local open mic night every event called A Box of Chocolates. Jay is born and raised in Long Island and living with his wife and pet bunny Onion. So that's a little bit about Jay and a little bit about what you're going to be witnessing. The title of this is Creating a Healthy Boundary Plan. And the role as a youth peer advocate is a unique role. Using our lived experience for our peer work may also come with some challenges, where setting strong boundaries might be helpful in addressing those challenges. In this TA call, we will discuss the different aspects of boundary crossings we may see in the youth we serve and how to address them. You will walk away with a TA call with the information needed to create a plan for creating and maintaining healthy boundaries. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Jay.
Yeah, hi everybody. So my name is Jay Culkin. I use the pronouns he, him, his. And I am the new youth training coordinator for Families Together in New York State. So I just put a little quick introduction. I know TJ did a great job introducing me just now, but just to add a little bit. So I am a credentialed youth peer advocate, yes, and I've had experience in the residential setting, community setting, and the clinic setting. So I have a wide array of experience with that. So I just wanted to real quick get to know y'all a little bit. If you want to put in the chat, I know some of y'all have already put some stuff in the chat, but just your name, pronouns, agency that you work at. And if you've already done that, then just put your dream pet. If you have a pet already, what would you want in addition to your current pet? Mini pet pig. Oh, these are cute. Love it. I would say for myself, I have a pet bunny, but I'd like a gerbil, which is smaller, easier to take care of. You put them in the little what do you call them? Tubes. It's a lot of fun. Right. I'm trying to move to the next slide. Oh, there we go. So just a few things. If you could just keep your mic on mute unless you're happening. Unless you're getting ready to speak. And if you want to put some messages in the chat as like a parking lot, if you have any questions as we're going along, I can answer them toward the end, or TJ, the co-host, might be able to answer some things as we go along. And just to acknowledge that everybody's coming from a different place of knowledge. We may have been put in situations where we were expected to cross our own boundaries, or maybe we're really good at keeping our own boundaries, and we've always been good at it. We're all coming from different places. So just, when we're going through this material, we're looking forward. So here are the few things that we are going to go over today. We're going to be clarifying the youth peer advocate role. Most of you already know it. And if you've gone through the 4-day training, you've gone over it quite a bit. But we're just going to review it real quick. We're going to talk about amplifying the youth voice versus becoming their voice. We're going to talk about having appropriate rapport with the youth rather than having inappropriate or too much attachment for our role. We're going to go through a few examples of boundary crossing pitfalls that we might see as youth peer advocates. We're going to be talking about maintaining trust within our role, and then we're going to talk about self-care to support boundary setting. And that's when we're going to actually come through with an actual concrete plan of how we're going to move forward in setting our boundaries and keeping healthy boundaries in our work. And I would recommend, of course, you don't have to, pen and paper, Word document, notes app. When we get to the part about the healthy boundary plan, if you want to just jot down some notes, maybe make your plan as we go along, it might be helpful for you. So, yeah. So the youth peer advocate role, some of the systems that we're going to work in are going to be the mental health, criminal justice, foster care system, and we might have a bunch of different roles. We're sharing our lived experience with intention in those different roles. We might be in a clinic setting, a residential setting, inpatient setting, all these different settings where we are sharing our lived experience in order to help the youth learn how to self-advocate and benefit from the system that they're in. So here are a few things that we are not doing as youth peer advocates. We're lived experience professionals, right? We're not clinic professionals. We don't give therapy, and we're not responding to crises. That's a big one that can cause us to cross our own boundaries because we care a lot about the youth that we work with, and so we want to respond for those crises immediately. We might have, okay, I want this youth to succeed, to grow. I relate to them a lot, so I want to help them through this crisis. It's kind of like something that I've been through, but that's not our role. We want to make sure that we're protecting ourselves, our boundaries, and the youth and their boundaries. And we're not responsible for providing consequences or discipline to the youth. That's not within our role, and that's another boundary that sometimes staff may have us, try to have us cross because they want us to. Ooh, sorry, having a little bit of a technical issue. So yeah, that's something that they might want us to cross boundaries of because they want us to assist with the youth, but that's not within the scope of our role. Right, so now we're going to get to the part where we're talking about speaking for a youth rather than amplifying the youth's voice. So we're keeping our boundaries in how we speak with the youth and amplify their voice, so that we're doing our job appropriately. So saying or doing things for the youth is something that we might get ourselves into as we're getting very passionate about helping the youth. And what we really want to do is affirm what the youth's needs and wants are. We're going to bat for them with what they're saying, not because, we have our lived experience, we might know what they want. It's about their voice. Centering your own lived experience rather than centering the youth's lived experience is another way that we might speak for the youth rather than amplifying that youth's voice. And it's very important to try not to take things too personally as well, right? So this is a youth-driven collaboration that we have together. So we're going to do our best to not take things personally and to be able to another technical issue. Hold on. Oh, okay. So we're not taking things too personally so that we can have that appropriate rapport and attachment with the youth. Speaking of attachment, just give me one moment. Sliding my. Oh, I'm sorry. So, in the chat, or if you want to come off of your mic, it's a space of non-judgment. So, of course, wherever you're at, you're at. Does anybody have any examples of times that they may have seen somebody or may have been speaking up for a youth rather than amplifying their voice, or even an example of a time where you felt like you did well with amplifying a youth's voice?
So I can say a time when I was speaking for Youth Unintentional is when I was having a quick check-in meeting with the other staff, not a formal meeting, but just engaging with them. And I had expressed how that youth was feeling that day. But instead of just leaving it at what they were feeling, I started to share they could probably benefit from this, or maybe we should do this for them. Instead of asking the youth, how did they want to be supported? I just jumped to conclusions of here's things that we should be doing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's definitely, when we get so attached and we want to see youth grow, it's kind of easy to fall into that little pitfall there. So thank you for bringing that up.
This is Shay piping in. I definitely had an interesting experience when I first started working with youth, and my youth had a chunny or care manager that they were not familiar with. And they didn't know what exactly the care manager was for. I tried a couple of times to really explain it to them and educate them on the program and the services and what they offer, what they can do. And they just weren't quite getting it, but could still benefit from the service. So I found myself kind of letting the care manager know with some of the things we would discuss, but not really allowing for the youth that I was working with to advocate for these things on his own. We were able to work around it, but yeah, I was definitely almost like middlemaning, like I was the liaison almost between him and his care manager. And that was an interesting situation. Definitely learned a lot there.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that too. It kind of sounds like you were on a team, and your role sort of got a little blurred because you were trying to be like an active participant on that team, but the youth is also part of the team. So yeah, no, that makes sense. Thanks so much. Does anybody else have any experiences, examples that they'd like to share?
There was one time, I'm unsure if this counts as amplifying the youth's voice or speaking for the youth, but there was one time long before I became a YPA where I noticed a child was having a hard time trying to explain an issue to his mother. He knew what he wanted to convey, but he didn't know how to put it into words, and so I stepped in and helped him find a way to explain it to the mother so she could understand. So that way it didn't turn into a big fight.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that as well. I think that was, well approached. I think, even if you notice that a youth is having a difficult time, talking to a certain family member or a certain member of their team, it might be helpful to kind of talk about it with them in advance, maybe while you're in a one-on-one visit or something like that, and say, hey, is this something that we'd like to go over? How are we going to approach this person? That way you can kind of be more in the back, so to speak, or in the background, sort of the support, so that youth can take a lead on that. But I think that that was, very well handled. Thanks for sharing that. We'll go to the next slide. Maybe we will. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we're speaking about attachment now. So here are a few things, you can see on this slide, that they're examples of when we have unhealthy or non-professional attachments. So you might have to approach that boundary setting in a small, I'm sorry, in a more strong way or a more direct way in order to kind kind of get your point across and try to prevent these things from happening, especially if these things are already happening, right? Like, so if the youth is saying like, hey, I'd like your social media. We've been cool. So I want to, you know, add you on Instagram or something like that. That might be where you're going to have to be a little bit more, you know, change up your approach, maybe approach something different with your boundary setting. You might have to set a little bit stronger boundaries and maybe even have a very honest conversation. You know, as youth peer advocates, we're trying to be honest and transparent, an honest conversation about why it's not appropriate to do so. You know, and reassuring the youth it's, you know, there's a reason for it. We're doing it in order to maintain professional boundaries so they can get the most out of the service. And, you know, you might notice they don't want to be discharged because they want to spend a lot of time with you, right? That's another point where we might need to work on setting stronger boundaries so that they can understand this is, you know, this is growth. We're trying to get you to be able to be your own self-advocate, and I'm here in the background. You know, I'm here in the ways that I got to be here. Okay. Yeah, these are some examples of boundary crossings to be mindful of, right? This is the pitfalls that I was talking about earlier. Oh, okay, there we go. So we might have the best of intentions trying to make the youth feel cared about. You know, we might even find ourselves getting into these pitfalls. You know, I've been speaking a lot about the youth crossing boundaries, but sometimes we cross boundaries as youth peer advocates because of our dedication to our work. So giving personal gifts, right? Having contact outside of business hours, especially having any personal conversations, right? Our role can be pretty casual compared to a lot of other professional roles. So we might find ourselves, you know, oh, I want to send, you know, the youth a little encouragement off hours. And then, you know, it starts to blend that personal and professional life. And then too much personal information or oversharing is another thing that we might find ourselves doing. We're being told to share our story as part of our role. But we're also taught, you know, in the 4-day training how to share with intention. And there's also a lot of other resources that are up and coming, things that exist that help us kind of narrow down what we can share strategically rather than giving all the details, oversharing everything, and kind of, you know, putting all that information to the youth. Does anybody have any other examples of maybe, you know, things that you've done, things you've seen done, or just things you can think of that could be considered boundary crossings?
I think a boundary crossing might be where you personally, while you're working, you're having a rough day, your personal life is kind of getting in the way of your work. And you know, it's clear to the youth that something's off. They might not know what is off, but they sense that you're off. And I think that like a boundary crossing would be explaining like what's impacting you, why your mood is different, and what's upsetting you. But I'm wondering is it is it a boundary crossing to say that, well, I have a lot of things going on, I'm having a hard day, but I want to be here, or would that be appropriate?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about, you know, intention and what the youth is going to benefit from, right? So if you're looking very stressed, it's on your face, you know, and the youth is checking in, wants to know how you're doing, you might want to use it as an opportunity to model, you know, yeah, I'm taking care of myself, you know, I'm doing the things that I have to do. I'm not having a great day, but here I am. I'm showing up. These are the ways that I can show up. You know, and we're gonna have a great time on our visit and everything like that. As opposed to kind of letting it all out, venting about your day. You know, so it's really about modeling what is appropriate to model to the youth, that we're taking care of ourselves. Because, you know, a little bit of sharing about our day might not be a boundary crossing. It might be modeling that I am able to heal, right? I'm strong and I'm showing up for you, as opposed to here's everything that's going on in my day. Now we're going to make this about, you know, all the things that are going on in my day type of thing. If that makes sense. Yeah. Does anybody else have any examples you could put in the chat? Go off mic, whatever. Or off mute, sorry.
I do have a youth that likes to ask very specific and very personal questions. So it's an interesting learning experience figuring out how to navigate those conversations and how to answer those questions.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, I resonate with that for sure. Being a youth peer advocate in the past and working with youth and knowing, a lot of times it's with good intentions. They want to get to know you.
Yeah.
Or, they want to see, hey, how similar is your lived experience to mine, or even just to show that they care, like, hey, I'm interested, in you and I like getting to know you kind of thing. But then again, it's all about, intention. And sometimes you can have that conversation when we talk about making the boundary plan of like what we're going to say, to kind of, like you said, curb them and be like, well, let's not talk about this, but let's talk about this instead.
Would remaining in frequent contact with the person after the work is all done be a boundary crossing?
I think it's there's a lot of discretionary things, right? Like there's ethical things to consider. Like, for example, are you going straight into keeping contact with them and having contact on a daily basis and you're a friend, or are you giving them your email and saying, hey, you can reach out to me and just give me some updates. I'm not going to reach out to you, but if you want to let me know what's going on kind of thing every once in a while, like and it also varies from agency to agency. I think it would be good to figure out with direct supervisor, like what the agency's policies are as well. But again, it's just really very discretionary. We have to think about like, are we going into that friend territory or that family member territory? Or are we saying, as a professional, I like to know what's going on, with you if you're having some successes after we depart, you want to send me a card, you want to the agency or something like that, or well, I'm sorry, not that, but like an email. I have a professional email, right? You're from SEO. So you might want to use your SEO email. Hey, I'm just going to give this to you. You reach out to me. If you just want to give me some updates, and what kind of conversations are you having with them when they email back and forth, thinking about, are these conversations that I would have with them when I was their youth peer advocate, or are these conversations that I'd have with, a friend? Go to the next one. Maybe. There we go. Okay. So a few points about maintaining trust with the youth, right? We might have this intention of sharing a lot about ourselves and answering a lot of questions and doing all these things that end up being boundary crossings in order to establish trust or establish rapport. So here's a few ways that you can do that without doing those boundary crossings, like maintaining that trust, building rapport, right? So we have making commitments that you can keep. We might make commitments or we might say that we want to do things or we're going to do things for youth because we really genuinely do want to do those things. But then when you aren't able to make those commitments, it can damage that trust. We have active listening with compassion. Being compassionate to their perspective as well, even if they are, like Cheyenne said, they're asking these questions because they want to get to know you. Just being able to approach that with compassion and be like, I see your intention. However, whatever the explanation you might give, validating the feelings. I think we do a lot about that. We do a lot with that. Sorry. It's not about the thoughts, it's about the feelings. And a lot of times they have frustrations. Frustrations are valid. Honesty and transparency and modeling, taking accountability is a big one as well. Right. So if you find yourself doing, a little boundary crossing and you're like, oh, you know what, I have to be honest with you. Youth, I did not, think that through, or, I didn't mean to do this, or my intention was this, but I see the impact as this, whatever the case may be, being able to explain when you make a mistake. Maybe you made a commitment, right, that you couldn't keep. And you let them know it's not something that I should have done. And next time as I go forward, I'm going to make sure that if I'm going to commit something to you, I'm going to keep that commitment, and really showing the accountability of that is going to maintain trust with the youth, because you're showing them that you're a human and that you are a human that's doing your best and you're still showing up for them. You care. so if you are trying to maintain trust with the youth without boundary crossing, those are a couple things that you could do. Let me just go to the next slide now. Okay. Oh, and I'm sorry, let me go back to that slide. Does anybody have any other ideas of how they can maintain trust with the youth? If you'd like to go off mute or put in the chat, whatever works.
I think part of it can be clarifying with them what are things like what are topics or conversations that you have to put in documentation and what you can leave out of documentation, as well as like what things are you required to tell your supervisor about and what things can stay between you guys as conversations. So like I think that the youth having a really good idea of HIPAA in regards to your personal conversations is important for maintaining that trust.
Yeah, that is an excellent example, of that honesty and transparency. It's true. We're teaching them to be good self-advocates, or advocates for themselves in the way that they want to see it. And so giving them that, information and being transparent about that is a great way, to build that trust for sure.
I think to go off of that too, with the honesty and transparency, is just being authentic. I think that I've definitely seen a number of people almost try to like adapt their personality when they're around or meeting with a certain person, maybe trying to act a little cooler or what they might perceive as a cooler person. And our youth, they're smart and they can see right through that. So just be your true and authentic self, and that honesty and transparency, I think, is huge.
Yeah, thank you. I think, I think I've run into I'm going to be very transparent. I think I've run into that pitfall myself as well. Where trying to relate a little bit, with the youth and kind of overdoing it. And I think I actually did see that those youth kind of closed up a little bit because they could see, come on, Jay, are you serious? So, that was an awesome example that thank you for bringing to the table. Does anybody else have any examples? We can move forward then to the moment you've all been waiting for, making the boundary plan. This is how we're gonna take something away from this. Like I said, if you want to, get out a Word doc, notes app, whatever the case may be, here's your opportunity. So we're going to make a concrete plan with 4 steps, on how to set healthy boundaries, because it's very hard to do in the moment if we, don't have our plan or something to sort of refer back to. So having it kind of ready, what you want to do, how you want to handle things. You can't prevent everything, of course, as things go along. But it's still good to have that, what am I going to do if something similar or something like this pops up? So the first step, I am going to go through every step a little bit more in depth and we'll have a conversation about it. So we're going to first go with preventative measures and initial boundaries. Then we are going to plan the redirections in the moment, anything that you weren't able to cover while you're preventing. How to manage triggers and take breaks. This can be tough if a youth is saying something in the moment. You got to manage it in the moment. This is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to figure it out. And then hard stops. Hopefully, it wouldn't come to this point, or at least not very often, but you might have to request a reassignment or maybe really put a big boundary out there of, this youth is doing something unacceptable, saying something unacceptable. We're not able to, fix these boundaries and set these boundaries. So what are we going to do moving forward to give that youth a little bit more of the support and a better match, that can set those boundaries or have those boundaries in place as needed. Okay. So we're going to have a little bit of a conversation about it, putting out our thoughts, writing anything down, whatever you'd like to do. As far as preventative measures and initial boundaries go, what are some ideas of what we can tell the youth right away, to avoid any kind of confusion, right? I have an example, I might say, I only answer my phone Tuesdays and Thursdays, 9 to 5. I might say that as soon as I meet them. And of course, share as you're comfortable. If there's a boundary that you're not comfortable sharing out here, and it's a boundary you have with the youth, you don't have to share it. But if you have any examples of potential boundaries you might want to set right from the get-go, anybody, you could turn off mute or put in the chat. Or if anybody has any questions about this.
One of the first ones that I always tried to set, because I live locally to where I work, and as do a lot of the youth that I serve, is I do let them know about the hours that I'm able to answer my work phone. I also mentioned too that I'm often in one-on-one sessions. So if I can't answer that phone call, please send me a text message. And when I see it, I will get back to you when I can. And I let them know also that I do not take it home. It stays here in the office with me. But outside of that, also, because I am a local person, if you see me locally outside of the office, because this is something that happens for those of us who work in this office very often, please know that your confidentiality means a lot to us. We take it very seriously. Please do not be offended if I'm not approaching you or getting excited, running up to you, saying hello. You are more than welcome to approach me and say a hello if you want to, but it will be a hello, nice to see you, have a nice day, and nothing more than that. We don't want to discuss anything in terms of our appointments, your treatment, nothing like that. If you want to wave to me, I will wave back. Please don't be offended if I don't approach you.
I just wanted to piggyback off of some of what Shay said, especially if you're like in a neighborhood or a community where they might see you in the community. Something, you can do is let them know if you see me in the community to respect your privacy and confidentiality. Please do not approach me. If you wave, I'll wave. But if I'm not working, we're not engaging on that level. And you can also clarify how like this is for their safety too, because someone in the community might witness them engaging with the YPA and then be asking them questions and everything that they might not want to answer. So you could also phrase it that way. I wanted to bring up an example in working in a residential setting. Something that I've experienced in the different residential settings I've worked in is youth want hugs, especially youth who don't have a supportive or frequent interaction with their family. They want hugs if they really trust you. And that's something that can get kind of sticky, especially, you're considering the environment we're working in and the lack of support that this youth is receiving from family and other individuals. So something that I did when it came to some youth who seemed very, very desperate for that just physical contact, that in a platonic way, it's not any sort of attraction like that, is I established that one, you have to ask me for a hug. You can't just approach me and give me a hug or assume I'm going to hug you back. You have to ask me. And with the aspect of you have to ask me was a reinforcement of teaching consent in an age-appropriate way. And I even used the word, you have to ask for my consent before you give me a hug. And that was one of the things I did. I also, when it came to giving hugs, I wouldn't hug them front facing them. I would always do a side hug. And I also established that with them is this is proper physical contact boundaries. If I am going to give you a hug, it's always going to be from the side. It's never going to be from the front. And this was something that I only applied to in the residential setting itself. I didn't apply this rule to clinic settings that I had worked in, and that is taking under consideration the specific lack of support and the environment that youth was residing in.
Thank you. Yeah, Shay, you had a lot of very you had a lot of detail in what you were saying, which is really good because you were very clear about your boundaries, I think, with this youth, the example that you gave. And I think that was, a point that I was actually going to get to, is that setting these boundaries from the get-go, you're creating a sense of security as well, right? The youth know what to expect a lot of times, and it's not just youth. A lot of times, with any relationship that we have in our lives, any professional relationship, we're trying to figure out where the line is. If people are not setting the line, like what can I do? What can't I do? We might do things without knowing, that it's a boundary crossing because the person never said it. Right. So it doesn't guarantee that the youth won't push boundaries, but at least it does give that sense of security of like, I know what to expect. I know right from the get-go, I can't do this, I can do this, I can't do this, I can do this. And it will protect yourself and the youth with that point of reference that you have. Do we have any other points you want to make? Any questions? I see something in the chat. I'm going to read that out. So far, I haven't really worked with many youth yet, but with the current youth I'm working with, he already has a naturally reserved personality. So I haven't had to set much boundaries with the youth, except that I am working with, current youth that I'm working with, except for scheduling appointments and figuring out which times work best for the both of us. I think that's really good that the youth kind of has a reserved personality right from the get-go, and they're able to be like, it almost seems like maybe they have their own boundaries that they've sort of told you already. Here's my boundaries, and now I'm going to try to figure out your boundaries. I still think it would be a good idea to, even if you don't set them right from the get-go, kind of knowing what you'd want to set, what you'd want to tell the youth. Sorry, a moment. Okay. Okay, so yeah, it might be helpful to try to figure out, what you'd want to set anyway, and just go from the get-go. It's just a best practice of, this is what I want the youth to know. And even if you have to set it after the fact, you've had a few meetings with them, you've seen that things have gone pretty well. I think it's never too late to still give those boundaries, like, hey, we've gotten to know each other for a few visits, and I just wanted to have this quick discussion with you, about boundaries and how we're gonna, how our relationship is gonna look, our professional relationship is gonna look from here on out. But thank you for sharing that. Okay. Any more questions regarding preventative measures and initial boundaries, things that you're setting from the get-go?
I have something, not a question, just to add.
Sure.
Yeah, something I kind of learned early on with one of the first youth I worked with, was kind of clarifying like personal triggers between you and also like the caregivers and whatnot. Like early on, one of the first youth I worked with, like snapping your fingers was a big trigger, and I would have never known that because it's something I myself will like sometimes do just without thinking, is snapping my fingers. And so clarifying those early on can be really important.
I think you made an excellent point as well about how not only does it benefit, giving that security in the relationship of like, now they know what to expect from the YPA, but it invites them to do the same thing. You're kind of modeling, that's true, you're modeling what good boundary setting looks like so that they can also do that. I think, a lot of our youth are in very vulnerable positions, and don't feel like they can stick up for themselves and set their boundaries. And you're showing them, I can set boundaries, you can set boundaries. So that's a really great example. So Okay, so we are going to move forward if nobody has anything else. And if you have a pen and paper out, notes app, just take a moment to think, what do I kind of want to say from the beginning with youth? We'll go to the next slide here. Okay. So the second thing that we're going to do is planning our redirections, right? So let's say we set a boundary right from the get-go. I said I'm not going to respond to the phone call, right? I said it was it Tuesdays, Thursdays from 9 to 5, and then you get a call at 9 o'clock at night on a Wednesday. How are you going to approach that? Maybe it was not intentional. Maybe they forgot the boundary. Maybe they thought, oh, this is an emergency. Let me see if maybe they'll answer, for an urgent thing. So thinking about the questions, how are you going to approach it if a youth requests or demands something that crosses your boundary? So, a couple of examples as I have a conversation with them the next time that I see them. Another thing is I might give a replacement. I might say I can't do this, but I can do that. What are the different things that you can do to have a conversation with them or to give them some reassurance, right? And that was the next point is, what reassurance will you use to maintain the rapport? So thinking about things that you can say, maybe just like I said, I can't do this, but I can do that. I am still here for you, even though I can't do this thing. These are the things that I can do. Does anybody have any examples for that?
I actually really like the last question with your example, an unexpected hug. That goes back to what I said earlier is like that physical contact when a youth is desiring physical contact. And like I shared my personal example, and for me, that was a very environment, that setting type of thing. Um, but I think that like overall, like I think that's something that if you're not comfortable with that, or if you feel like that's crossing your own boundaries, or if your agency, your supervisor says that that's not something that they are going to view acceptable, even in a modified way, I think it's, important to reassure them. I, you know, I appreciate that you feel so supported by me that you want to give a hug, but then clarifying, due to my role or due to my own feelings, I am uncomfortable with hugs, and I think that sharing, I am uncomfortable with this. In my thoughts, I feel like it's okay to say that because you're demonstrating asserting healthy boundaries, you're modeling that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I have, an example as well. This was not something that I experienced, but something that another youth peer advocate at the agency I used to work at experienced where one of the youth kind of like did this thing with their finger on their shoulder, like kind of tracing something, and the youth peer advocate actually handled it almost with a little bit of humor. So you might not, knowing your youth like personally, like you've come to know them, you know a little bit more about their personality. What she did was she kind of like danced away and was like, and then kind of gave like I appreciate, that we're trying to be silly, we're trying to be funny, but that's not something that, I really like I don't like the feeling of that. And I'd appreciate it if we don't do that future, from now on. And it worked very well. The youth responded very well with that because it's like, oh, they're okay. They're good. They're just telling me, that I can't do that rather than being kind of formal and stern about it. But it depends youth by youth. Some youth love direct, you know, boundary setting. Just tell me how you feel. And some youth prefer a little bit of, humor or a little bit of lightheartedness with it. You just kind of have to feel it out, see how it is with that individual youth. Mhm. Does anybody have any examples of redirections that they might do or things that they might do to kind of communicate with the youth that a boundary's been crossed? And you can take some time to write it down in, whatever you're using, Notes app, Word doc.
I don't know if this was at all mentioned yet. I did just have to step aside there for a second and I apologize, but now that I'm back, I want to throw in there that something I discovered very early on in my role is that when a boundary was crossed and it needs to be addressed, waiting is never a good thing. I forget the exact way that my supervisor had stated it to me, but it was something along the lines of like that free time in between you addressing the crossing of the boundary or reestablishing that boundary is almost giving them permission that it was okay because you had taken so long to circle back. And so if you come back to them 2 weeks later and say, hey, 2 weeks ago, this happened, and then it's kind of, oh, why did you wait 2 full weeks to tell me? And it kind of discredits the boundary that you're attempting to protect there. So I very much agree with the mindset of better sooner than later, even if you're a little uncomfortable doing it. I've even had conversations with a person that I'm serving and said something along the lines of, I'm about to have to reiterate a boundary, and I'm a little bit uncomfortable doing so because setting boundaries is not something that I've always been very good at, and I'm still learning how to do it. And I think that this person really just kind of appreciated that honesty and hung in with me, and we got through it. So
Yeah. Wow. I appreciate that example. Yeah. And it does circle back to honesty. I think honesty and transparency is a huge thing for us as youth peer advocates. And I totally resonate with that, kind of addressing it sooner rather than later. I think that some of us can be very like conflict avoidant or people pleasy. And so it does get hard to do that. But it is good to keep in mind, if I am able to plan my redirections, ahead of time, know what I'm going to say, even if it is a little bit uncomfortable, like you said, it's important to set the boundary anyway, because in the long run, it's going to benefit the rapport. Any other thoughts, questions before we go on to the next one? You could put it in the chat, unmute. Let me get to the next one. Okay, so managing triggers and taking breaks. As I had just said, sometimes we could be a little conflict avoidant, people pleasy, whatever the case maybe you aren't, but some of us can be, right? Or the boundary crossing might have been so frustrating that it really got to you, and it's hard to manage the triggers. So what are you going to do in the moment to self-care and decompress if you're triggered by the boundary, right? So I had kind of put a point here to talk about, there's sort of yellow light boundary crossings, we could say, if we're looking at it like a stoplight, where you might need that reassurance, that break. You might need to step away, but it's not that red light hard stop. So when we're getting to that point of yellow light where it is getting overwhelming, what are you going to do to decompress? And how are you going to communicate that to the youth? And then how will you make the most of that break? How will you be able to take what you need to take out of that? And a break can mean a break in the moment if it's feasible. And it could mean a break as in, I need to skip the next visit. We visit every week. Next visit, I need to let my youth, I gotta take care of myself. I gotta take care of something. Something has come up, however you want to communicate it or however it's best to communicate it, personalized to the youth. So as an example, right, imagine that a youth says something, traumatic. They say, I went through this trauma and it's something that is triggering to you because you've went through a similar trauma and they might be going into depth. So what are you going to, say? I need to step away from this conversation. How are you going to say it? Do we have any ideas, about how we could do that?
So would it be appropriate if after the youth has shared what they want to share, you can validate that, that sounds like it was really awful for you to go through, maybe give another like reassurance statement, and like I'm wondering, would it be appropriate to say, um I want to support you with this, but I have to go to the bathroom real quick and I'll be back. And then maybe like in that bathroom, you're taking that minute or two to like regulate yourself or figure out what you need, and then you go back to the youth. Like, do you think that would work?
I think depending on the environment that you're in, but I could imagine that that would work in a lot of different environments. Um, you know, I think that that's a really good example, and that's a really good way, to kind of say, "Hey, I want to support you. Just give me 1 minute. I have to do this. I have to do that. Give me a minute." I think that's great, and I think that that would work very well. And that's an example of kind of an in the moment thing, right? An in the moment break.
I feel like this is it's almost like very circumstantial in a way, right? Because I feel like if it speaks to certain traumas of my own, I might be able to just take on that conversation and not really let it get to me in that way. Um, if it is getting to me a little bit, maybe even circling back again to that honesty and transparency of like, I want to support you in this. Um, and this is also part of knowing when and where it's beneficial to give pieces of yourself. Maybe a statement along the lines of, but I'm not entirely sure how to in this moment. I've endured something similar. And I am here for you. So what is it that you need from me? Just letting them know that that gets to me a little bit too. I'm not sure how to move forward from this. Let's come together and figure out how I can better support you and we can move forward together.
Yeah, that's a really open and communicative answer. I like that one.
I
Um,
like that. Sorry, go ahead, Jen.
no, go ahead.
I really like that too, Shay. That's not something that I personally did in my experience of being a YPA. I just kind of kept my composure, tolerated the trigger, and then found a way to get myself some privacy. But I feel like with what you're sharing, like with that example, you're demonstrating setting healthy boundaries, and you're also acknowledging that you're still healing and there's still things that impact you. And I really like that because I feel like you're role modeling. Like there are some topics that are going to make me feel upset related to my own trauma, and that's natural. And then you're reiterating, like, how can I support you? What do you need from me with this awareness that I can't get deep into this? Like I hadn't ever considered that before, so I'm really taking in that approach.
Thank you so much for that feedback. I feel very good about this now. I like it was my supervisor who kind of suggested that to me. And I was just thinking about when I was a youth receiving services, how I might have responded to the person I was working with just being that open and honest and upfront with me. And I think as a youth, I would have really appreciated that and thought that same thing, like, wow, this isn't just some robotic college educated person that I'm meeting with. This is a real person with real experiences, and they're feeling real feelings right now. And this isn't something I go through alone. Now, this is something we kind of go through together in a way. So, thank you for that feedback.
And I'd like to provide an example as well from my own, experience working as a youth peer advocate. And this is not going to work in every circumstance. But while with in a residential setting, it was actually not a youth that said something that had triggered me, but it was actually a staff member. And I had, invited the youth kind of to do grounding with me. And I was transparent, what the staff said was, in my opinion, not appropriate. And this is how it could impact people. And I'd like to take a minute to sit down on the floor and do some breathing. Would y'all like to participate as well? And some of them did, and some of them didn't, and that's okay. But it was a great way for me to almost invite them into that space of like, just in case also this is affecting you, and if you're speaking about something that could be triggering with the youth, you might say, hey, this might be, I can see this is affecting you, and this is what I do to kind of process it. I'd like to take a minute to do that because this was a heavy topic. Do you want to do that with me? So even inviting, if you're comfortable, you might need that space, but if you're comfortable to say, I want to manage that trigger in the moment, and I'd like to invite the youth to do so, that could be another strategy. So I kind of want to get into the third question. I think I kind of mowed over it very quickly, but how do you think you can make the most of that break, whether it's a minute or again just like taking some time away to skip some visits or something, whatever the case may be? How can you make the most of it?
You use the
Um,
time to write notes.
I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, that could be something. I mean, if you're the type of person that, you're a little behind on notes and hey, I'm going to collect my thoughts, I'm going to get it all done. That way I can kind of focus on a different, task. Sure, by all means. That's a good one.
Definitely just obtaining some support and seeking supervision, even if you can't go into the detail as to protect this person's confidentiality, just getting some baseline support. For me, it's from my supervisor, from my previous peer who is now a direct coworker of mine. And then even sometimes at home, I'll give very like baseline, to my husband. I had someone just cross a boundary today, and it was a pretty significant one. I got pretty triggered. And I'm not sure how to move past it. And I give him just that. And even with that, he's able to give some kind of support or words of wisdom, if you will, or something that helps to kind of bring me. So definitely obtaining some support, seeking guidance and supervision if needed. Hashtag self-care.
Thank you. Those were some really good examples. And it kind of was, incorporating other people and support systems and networks. That's great. I would say even in the moment, I think that the way that I make the most of my breaks is being able to pay full attention to whatever I'm doing during the break. Making sure that there's no distractions, I'm spending my full time and attention to this 1 minute that I'm doing breathing. I actually do have, it could be a recommendation. I'm not, pushing it as an ad, but I do have some apps. There's an app I have that's like called Void Pet, and it like has this 1 minute meditation, right? So a minute is very quick, but I'm dedicating my entire self to that minute. I'm not going to let anything distract me because there's a short amount of time and I need to make the most of that minute. So that would kind of be my recommendation as well. And in not the next slide, but the slide after, I think I'm going to have a few more more concrete examples as well. So if anybody has any thoughts, maybe wants to take a few minutes to just write things down, Word doc, Notes app, whatever the case may be. Put things in the chat, open space. Okay. Let's go to the next one, the hard stops. Right. We care a lot about what we do. That's why we're here. And so it can be very difficult to say, you know what, this is too much. I do have to step back. That's hard. Right. So what first we might want to distinguish what are they, right? What are sometimes there's those yellow light things that we were talking about. And if they happen continuously, they start to become the red light types. So we might want to brainstorm, oh geez. We might want to brainstorm, on our pen, paper, whatever the case may be, Words app. What are those yellow lights that if they're done continuously, you know what, I have to make a hard stop. For example, it might be that you have a specific trauma that you've been through, and you say, this is a trauma that I cannot discuss. This is something that I can't talk about, and the youth continues to bring it up. You've tried to redirect them in multiple ways, and they continue to bring it up, right? That might become the hard stop. That's the red light. They've done, they've brought it up so many times that it is starting to adversely impact my health. And there might be some boundaries that are red lights, hard stops, things that I said, this is a big thing. This is a big boundary. This is very serious to me because it like hurts me very deeply. The boundary has been crossed. You have to, protect yourself and your health as well. So those might be some things you might want to write down and just figure out, like, what are the things that cause me to need to have this conversation, and how will you communicate it to your supervisor or whoever is in charge of these assignments, matches, right? And some of the things you might want to think about as well is when you get to that hard stop point, wanting to request reassignment, how you're going to approach it. Also, how are you going to process and go through the reassignment, right? Like, so one of the examples I have is, are you willing to do a closure meeting? Is it going to benefit the youth to have a closure meeting? It might not. And these are some things that you can talk about with your supervisor. Are you even willing to do something like that if it's appropriate? So these are some things you might want to write down, think about, plan for. Hopefully it wouldn't, get to a point like this, but it can. We're working with a lot of different youth with very unique needs, desires, wants, goals. So it might be something that we have to think about. Are there any ideas, or any examples even, of communicating a hard stop?
So I had a situation where I had reviewed the I guess the case profile of this youth, and in that it identified like what is the trauma and what are their PTSD symptoms. And one of the symptoms was external responsive flashbacks. So when I say like an external expression of flashbacks, I mean like this person would mentally think that they're experiencing what happened in the moment. Their body would start moving as if what was happening in their head was happening to them. And they would start to mislabel people. So they would even call a staff member by the abuser in their head. So they would have very, very vivid flashbacks that were outwardly expressed. And right away from the get-go, I told my supervisor, I can engage with this youth. However, I can't be left alone with them, because if they need support, I can't provide the type of support they need, because their trauma was very, very similar to my own. It was too similar. And I also expressed that I can't be left alone with them. And if they have a crisis, if they have a flashback, I need to be sent to a different unit. You have to switch me out. I cannot witness their external expression of the flashback, because it will drastically impact me. And I ended up being in a situation where I was left alone with them. And this youth had a very intense, vivid flashback. And it really impacted my mental health. And I ended up taking off the next 2 days because it so drastically impacted my mental health. I repeatedly expressed to my supervisor how this impacted me, requesting a meeting and saying I need support, and I didn't receive that. So after 3 weeks of requesting this and not receiving that, I ended up quitting last minute, because I was assigned to be on their unit that day, and I wasn't going to go in and be their direct staff member. That was one of the things I established from the get-go I can't do. So for me, my hard stop was, I expressed this, I didn't receive support, and now I have to leave because you're still not supporting me. And I feel like that might be a really extreme example where reassignment could have been possible. Don't put me on their unit. That's it. That could have been the solution. But I didn't receive that type of support from my supervisor, even though I requested it.
Thank you so much for sharing that story, because that actually brings me to a really good point that I'd like to make. That there are people that you can reach out to if your voice is not being heard when you set your work boundaries as well. You could reach out to us just to get some guidance. My email will be at the end of the um slideshow. My apologies. But there's also, you could reach out to the local OMH youth advocacy specialist or advocacy specialist, right? I don't know all of them off the top of my head. I know Kathy Kent is New York City. I know Robbie Lettieri is Long Island. That's just because I'm from there, but there are supposed to be some from a bunch of the regions throughout New York. So you might want to reach out to them as well. If things are not being taken care of by direct supervisors. I will share, I'm very fortunate that my supervisor at my previous position was a peer herself. So it was a little bit easier to get my point across, but sometimes we're being supervised by people that are not peers and they don't quite understand, the intricacies of working with a peer. So it may be something that you'll have to escalate and advocate for yourself as well. Thank you for bringing that up. Does anybody have any other ideas, maybe questions, maybe concerns of, I'm not sure I'll be able to figure this out. Is there something else I can try? Any other ideas?
What would you do in a scenario where informing the client would leave a negative impact?
That is a good question. And I think that does come back to getting guidance from the supervisor, as well. If there's something that you feel is, I'm not sure how to navigate this, I need some support in breaking this news to the youth, I'll reach out to a supervisor. Or you might want to work on, reassurance strategies beforehand. If it's something that you have a concern about on just like a general basis, like coming into this as a new position, I just want to make sure that I'm doing things the right way. Let me come up with some reassurances that I can give to the youth. Like one of the reassurances could be, when I had left the residential setting at the agency that I worked at, one of my reassurances was, I've spoken to the supervisor, and we've come up with this idea that the next person who comes after me, y'all will be able to sit in on the interviews for that new youth peer advocate. And that gave a little bit of reassurance and kind of put the power back in their hands a little bit over a situation that seemed almost like a loss of control or frustration. Because turnover can be very high in some of these settings. So, the reassurance, giving the power back is really important. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, for me, the only time I've really had to do like a hard stop or request a reassignment is when things are crossing boundaries in a personal way. Like I had someone try to, so it turned out that this person that I was meeting with, they were an adult, they weren't a youth. I haven't run into this with any of my youth yet because again, kind of different crowds and this was a personal thing, but it turned out that they knew my significant other, used to hang out with my significant other, have been in the house that I live in currently. And this person that I was meeting with, they knew all of this and I didn't until a little bit further down the road when they finally decided to, hey, I don't know if you know, but I know your significant other. Here's all these pictures of us at your house when we were younger. It was, wow, that is very interesting. You do know my significant other and you have been in my home. So unfortunately that is a little too close for comfort. That is a little bit personal. And I think that our best course of action might be for you to start meeting with a different peer, if you'd be open to that. And this person thankfully was super receptive to that. It turns out that the reason they didn't make me aware of our connection was because they were also a little uncomfortable about it and they weren't sure how to bring it up and address it. So anything that's crossing a line between my work life and my personal life, that is a hard stop for me. That is something I am unwilling to get into.
Yeah, that's a really good example as well, honestly. A lot of, I mean, especially in maybe rural areas where it's like everybody knows each other, or you live in the same town, like down here on Long Island or in the city, hey, you're a few blocks away. You might have those connections, those personal connections that you didn't realize, or even maybe you get the piece of paper with the name and then you see them in person, you're like, oh gosh, I've seen that person before, right? Or I've seen that youth before. And that does bring up an excellent point that like we've been saying, it's a crossing of personal and professional. So that might be a hard stop, even though technically the youth didn't actually cross any particular boundaries. It's still a boundary that we have to be mindful of. So thank you for bringing that up, and please take a few minutes if you need to, writing down what your hard stops are as part of your plan. So on that, while I try to move to the next one. Oh, I almost forgot about this slide. Okay. So here's just a few examples of things that we can do as far as managing our triggers, making sure that we're practicing good work wellness so that we can keep showing up for the youth. So there's the stepping away piece, what we're going to do as we step away, what boundaries are we going to set. There's some physical self-care here. Even on my desk right now, I have like 1,000 fidgets that I can interchange throughout the day. That's what I need, right? Making sure you're hydrated, making sure you're keeping communication between yourself and coworkers, supervisors, and work-life balance. I have bold-faced take PTO. If you have it, you have a life, please. You have your life, and take care of yourself and be a person for sure. You come first. So that's really important. To keep in mind. And it's also really important so that you don't get things like compassion fatigue. That's a hot word. Burnout. Those are things that are going to make it so that you can't show up for the youth in the ways that you want to show up for the youth. You're taking care of yourself. It's going to, I don't want to use the word trickle down, the term trickle down, but just trickle down. It's going to come back to the youth. They're going to see you being happy, healthy, resilient, and it's going to help you do your best work. And also, you deserve it. You deserve to take care of yourself. Come on. That's why we get so far. We got to where we got to because we're taking care of ourselves. Keep going. And then just a quick reflection question to close us out today. What inspires you to keep doing this work even when the going gets tough? It's a small group, so I'd like it if we could unmute and kind of share, especially people that haven't shared yet, if you feel comfortable.
I guess what inspires me to continue doing this work is that I see myself in the youth, and I feel like it's an opportunity to help myself when I'm helping these different, youth that I may be working with. As I get more cases, I only have one case, so it's like I couldn't really say much or participate, but yeah, that's what really inspires me. Like I'm helping myself and I'm helping them progress and I'm giving them advice that could prevent mistakes that would have happened, So that's a blessing.
Yeah, that definitely is. Thanks so much for sharing. I know it kind of stinks that you only have one client, right now when you might want more, but you know what? Then all the power to you for coming here and being able to, get a good head start. So awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Yes, and before you know it, there could come a day that you're meeting and working with so many people, you're going to say, oh my gosh, it was so nice when I only had this one person. You'll look back on this and you'll reminisce. So it'll come. Something that inspires me was very similar to Caleb. It helps me just as much, if not more, than it helps any person that I am working with. But for me to witness a success, to assist a youth in setting a goal and then witness them accomplish it. I mean, that is that's something that really fills me up with pride. I feel pride for myself, for them, for the situation, the agency, the programs, and the training coming together as a team almost. Yeah, I know we meet so many awesome and wonderful people along the way and learn so much. I can't imagine myself doing much of anything else.
So for me, I really try to remember my motivator, like my core motivator. And I narrow it down to like just one primary thing so I could say it in one sentence. And that is, I want to be the support I needed when I was going through my lived experience. So, Shay and Caleb both mentioned how like it helps with their healing. For me, I'm not quite focused on how my actions and supporting them are helping with my healing. I'm more focused on what did I need then and how can I give that to them now? And my motivator is I needed someone in my experience and I didn't have that person. So I want to be that person.
For me personally, even after I myself had gotten past some past troubles, it still took a while for me to get back on my feet. And so what I would like to do is to help people grow and get back on their feet faster rather than wait a long time for it. And I would also like to help them have someone around.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of a lot of things that everyone's already kind of touched on a bit, but definitely with like a lot of the youth I work with, kind of just seeing how like growing up I was more kind of reserved and I didn't really have anyone to go to with a lot of the stuff I was dealing with. I kind of dealt with it on my own. Just being able to kind of give the youth somebody that they can talk to and open up with about these things and work with to reach their goals. And yeah, seeing that progress, seeing them make positive progress towards whatever goals they're working on, and even just being able to see them smile a lot of the time, like trying to have some humor going at the sessions and finding like what they find to be humorous, and yeah, just seeing smiles and laughs is it really inspires me to keep doing it. So
Thank you. It's a good one. For me, I would say that it's to prove that peers are important and necessary. Um, like I'm gonna put myself out there so I could be a good example, um, for why we need to keep doing the work we do. So thank you all for sharing. It's very inspiring and touching. I love it. So that is the end. Thank you so much for being here. Not sure if y'all were aware, but this was my first presentation, so I'm very proud to have had you, and you should be honored.